Good afternoon, and welcome to Roosevelt University's Lifelong Lakers series. Launched in 2020, this series allows the greater community to sustain its growth beyond the classroom. We strive to provide opportunities for you to connect with fellow alumni, to pursue personal and professional goals, and to learn from experts in the Roosevelt community. Today's event is titled Prioritizing the Whole Self and Mentoring. Considering their own careers and life experiences, our guests will discuss the importance for mentorship to prioritize both personal and professional growth. They will share advice for mentors and mentees and will explore how mentorship can become a source of empowerment. Please use the comments function within YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook to submit any questions you may have for today's guests. Selected questions will be addressed at the conclusion of today's event. So now, please allow me to introduce our guests. First, Heide Groomes is a dear friend of Roosevelt, and she is the daughter of Lee Arthur Dunlap, a 1949 graduate of Roosevelt University. Heide is co-owner of Groomes Business Solutions, where she helps organizations reach and sustain an innovative market position in the global arena. As a leader, her hallmark is an authentic confidence that inspires others. She encourages strategic innovation in her team and takes the time to create productive person-to-person relationships. Welcome to Heide.
Thank you.
Our next guest and proud Roosevelt alumna is Rhapsody Snyder. Rhapsody is the executive director of the Chicago Jazz Philharmonic. She has been recognized as the 2017 Member of the Year for her work reinvigorating Naperville's Sonata and Sonatina Festival. And she sits on multiple boards for local nonprofit organizations, including our very own Chicago College of Performing Arts Advisory Board. Rhapsody frequently leads workshops in grant writing, leadership development, and organizational capacity. And welcome to Rhapsody.
Thanks for having me.
And with that, I now turn the conversation over to Heide and Rhapsody for prioritizing the whole self and mentoring. Enjoy.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Rhapsody.
Hi, Heidi.
It's so good to see you, and I'm so excited to have this discussion with you around mentoring.
Likewise. I look forward to hearing all the things that you have to teach me about mentoring as we go through this conversation.
Vice versa.
Well, one of my first questions for you, I would love to just kind of set a baseline and get to know a little bit more about what mentoring means to you and why it's important to you.
Well, I didn't grow up with formal mentors, not as we have them today. Some of that, I think, is mentoring just wasn't quite as prevalent as it is for our youth today. But I did grow up with tremendous role models, my parents. They instilled in me great values around hard work, education, treating people kindly and with dignity and respect. But they just weren't able to really help me navigate my career. And so I think sometimes that thing that is lacking or missing in your life becomes that thing that you are most impassioned about. And for me, that was mentoring. I do have a story that I wanted to share with you about how there was a time in my life where I didn't have a mentor, and I think my career trajectory would have been different had I had one. And it was when I was a student at UIC and I wanted to be a doctor. I was pre-med. I was working at the University of Illinois Hospital in their clinical labs department, drawing blood and then running the analyses. And one day, it was the day before Christmas Eve, I was drawing the blood of a young man who was my same age. And I walked into his room and he was sweating profusely. He was shaking and he just looked awful. So I ran down to the nurse's station and I said, that young man in that room, he's not doing well. Can somebody come in and help him? And the nurse said, oh, he's just a drug addict. He's having a tough time, but yeah, we know. And so I ran back down to his room and I said, tomorrow is Christmas Eve and I have a present for you and I want you to be here. And so I went to the store and I bought him a scarf. I wrapped it up really nice, put it in my little blood draw cart, went in his room the next morning, and he was gone. And I went back to the nurse's station and I said, "Where's that guy that was in the room down the hall?" And the nurse said, "Oh, he expired. That's him on the gurney in the hallway waiting to go to the morgue." So for me, that was quite an incredible experience. And being a person that's a little bit more on the sensitive side, I said, if I have to be that way in order to be a doctor, then I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And I think that experience so altered what I believed and what I thought about being a doctor. But had I had access, I think, to a doctor at that point in time in my life, it probably could have made all the difference for me in choosing that career versus what I eventually did, which was go into business. But I also want to touch on the importance of paying it forward. Um, I believe that I've been really fortunate that I've had a lot of great people in my life that have instilled and imparted so much wisdom in me. And I feel a sense of gratitude. And I think through that sense of gratitude is why it's so important to pay it forward. I always try to turn around and reach back and grab a hand and pull it up. And I think that if each and every one of us did that, I think the world would truly be a better place. What about you, Rhapsody? Tell me about why mentoring is so important to you.
Yeah, well, that's such a powerful story. And before I tell a little bit why mentoring is important to me, I'd love to just kind of touch on some themes I heard you talk about, which is, how much your parents instilled in you to be a compassionate person. And then you can see that value going into you wanting to be a doctor and caring for others.
Exactly.
And then even when you made the decision to not go that route, looking at your life and what you do and still being compassionate for others, that is that common through line throughout your life. I think that's also really powerful.
Yeah.
That value is so strong in you. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I have a very different story. I think I've been very privileged and very lucky to receive mentoring. I think very similarly to you, my parents very much valued being compassionate to other people and helping other people anytime that you can. We often had people living at our house who didn't have a place to live, for example, throughout my childhood. And so that was just kind of an assumed for me that you would do everything you can to help others. But I think the first time I really had a mentor, I didn't know I had a mentor. And when I was in college studying for my undergrad, my piano professor at the time really became a mentor for me, not only professionally or artistically, but also just within my life. And while I was going through my degree program for undergrad, my piano teacher, her name was Iglika Angelova. She's a fabulous pianist, and she was also becoming a life coach. And so I think that helping people through these pretty serious decisions and what you're going through in your life in your late teens and early 20s, she just couldn't help herself, but just kind of help. And so I think we both kind of fell into it. But I really didn't realize what she was doing until much later in my life. But our lessons would oftentimes be spent talking about the artistic, what's going on with the music. But then we would spend a lot of time talking about what was going on in my life and how does that impact the music? How does that impact how my practicing went that week? We talked about everything from career choices to how someone made me feel to boyfriends. And I'm so lucky to have her help me and guide me through those decisions. And she really ended up setting me on my career like that I have now. She helped me get my first arts administration job out of college. And I loved it so much. I didn't know I would like it. And I loved it so much that I stuck with it ever since. So I really owe my career that I have right now to her, helping me kind of navigate these things. I wanted to be a professional pianist. But actually she helped me to see that I have these other amazing skills, which could also lead to a very rewarding career. So
I know you have a story of paying it forward that you shared with me that that I would love to hear again.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I think paying it forward is very, very important. And she just really kind of helped me to see that it matters, how people treat you and how you treat them, and how we give and take from one another. And so, yeah, I always try to pay it forward for the next person as much as I can.
I think something you said was really key. You had a mentor, but you didn't know you had a mentor. And that's really how a lot of mentor-mentee relationships can form,
Yeah.
right? Well, I have a question for you. So thinking about some of the mentors that you've had in your life, what are some of the most impactful qualities that you think some of those mentors had, or what are most important qualities that a mentor should have?
Yeah. One thing that I really have valued when a mentor um, exercised something with me was just listening and trying to meet me where I am.
Mm.
Um, Always avoiding that should word, um, and allowing me to make those mistakes as well. I think that's also a huge part of it, because you can give guidance, um, and you can give suggestions, and you can fill in gaps, and you can provide color, context, and all of those things for the people that you're working or mentoring.
Sure.
But that's what it is. You can't tell them exactly what to do. I've always appreciated those people who did not do that with me. How about yourself?
I mean, I agree with you. I think effective mentors have to be willing to invest time,
Mm.
because it's not something that's just going to happen in one or two interactions to one another. So there has to be a commitment or an investment of time. I think they have to have an ability to show empathy, because like you said, you may not get it right the first time. And I think they need to just be able to kind of accept and understand that and show you a little bit of empathy. They have to be able to establish trust. Trust is huge, because if you don't have trust in the mentor-mentee relationship, then you're not going to get very far. And so, what are some of the ways that trust can be established? I think being open, being vulnerable, being me as a mentor, being vulnerable to my mentee and sharing some of my own personal stories and trials and failings with them, so that maybe they feel comfortable in opening themselves back up to me. Um, Also, I think some of the best mentors I've had, like you said, have been just very patient with me and allowing me to make those mistakes along the way, but also just kind of being there to pick me up. And there's no one size fits all, I think. But I think those are some of the thinking back on some of the best mentors that I've had, the greatest mentor-mentee relationships, I think had some of those qualities. There's so many different kinds of mentor-mentee relationships. Um, I mean, there's formal, informal, transactional, coaching, sponsorship. I thought for the sake of the folks at Roosevelt, we could maybe talk a little bit about some of those and experiences around those. So, what do you think around formal?
When I think of more formal mentoring, I think of more like professional.
Mhm.
Um, what should this next move in my career be, and what are some of the best strategies in order to get there, for example, and really just kind of picking people's brains. What about yourself? What do you think when you
I think of it just the way that you do, but also maybe an established relationship. So maybe you're participating in a program and there's a mentor, or Roosevelt assigns you a mentor, or your workplace assigns you a mentor. And so you have a more formal relationship where you're meeting on a regular basis, talking on a regular basis, sharing on a more regular basis. I'll take informal. I think informal is that person that kind of sees you and sees that you need something, and they swoop in to try to help you with that need. And it may not be a long-term relationship, and it could still be a long-term relationship, but more informal. It's like they see you when you need something, but you don't necessarily have regular check-ins and regular meetings. How do you see that?
Yeah, exactly the same way. And maybe it's, you come across these types of situations with people that you don't regularly see or talk to. It could even be a friend or a colleague or an employee or something like that. But yeah, like just kind of, it's more organic.
Exactly.
Yes,
Agreed.
absolutely.
Agreed. Well, then what about the transactional relationship? I've had a few of those in my life where I was just called upon to help this person through this particular situation or answer this important question for someone. So it could just be maybe a one touch point with that person. I have a friend who works at Roosevelt and I can get you in. That's kind of the transaction. And I think those happen a fair amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are the kinds of relationships that people lean on a lot, right? To get them
Exactly.
through any sort of life situation. It can be personal, could be career wise. And so I think this one is really interesting because I think it might be one that people do all the time and they might not know that they're doing it.
I agree. I think that type of mentoring relationship probably happens the most.
Yeah.
And then next, I think there's a coaching relationship, and there's an element of coaching that happens in all the other types of mentoring, especially the more formal kinds of mentoring. But the way I see coaching is maybe you got a new job, and it's kind of a stretch role. And maybe there's some things that you need a little bit of help understanding. And so maybe there's somebody in the department that just kind of tells you, this is how we do it here, or this is how things are done there. And it's not necessarily a formal mentoring relationship, but it's more helping you through a situation.
Yeah.
How do you look at it?
I have definitely leaned upon those types of mentoring relationships many times, especially in my career.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah. For example, I sought out a grant for a finance coaching for myself in our organization because I thought that it was the thing that I knew the least amount about. And I wanted to make sure that we stayed strong. And seeking that out, getting that grant, and putting it all together with this wonderful company was one of the best decisions that us as a team, as our organization, really got to utilize. And so not only was I doing it selfishly for myself, but also for the organization and to make sure that all of us and all of the staff got the same equal access and opportunity to this coaching as well.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, the last type of mentoring relationship, I think, is sponsorship. And when I think of sponsorship, I think of somebody who is willing to vouch for you. That's the person who's willing to take your resume up the ladder. It's the person that can speak to you as an employee or as an individual, that is willing to kind of put themselves on the line a little bit for you. And I've certainly had some good sponsors in my life.
Yeah, I think this is a really important type of mentoring,
Yes.
to do for others and to seek out someone who would be willing to do that for you.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that, I think some people say, well, how, how do you do that? And oftentimes I will always do it for someone that asks, especially friends and peers, and always trying to be as supportive of the people in my life, professionally or personally, who are trying to achieve their goals. So I think it's something that, while it might feel awkward at first, is worth just asking.
And it always comes back around.
Yeah.
There's always somebody willing to sponsor you.
Absolutely.
So what is holistic mentoring, and what does that mean to you?
For me, I think of holistic mentoring meaning it could include, the 5 different types of mentoring that we just discussed.
Right.
But for me, I feel like there's always something about when I'm mentoring someone that I'm learning more from them than they're learning from me. And in order for me to be able to do that, I have to always be asking more questions than giving advice. Because really the goal is to get people to feel empowered enough to trust their own instincts, and to trust that they make good decisions. That's a really difficult thing to be able to do. And it takes a lot of practice. So I feel like by asking a lot of questions of people for them to think about and make up their own mind about, you kind of are getting that practice, right? But also that other people's lenses, the way that they view the world, or what they view the world through. I like to say lenses more than baggage. And their obstacles are different than mine, right? And so how can I always exercise being more kind and being more compassionate, which I feel like is our word of the session.
It's a good word.
Yeah. How about yourself? What does holistic mentoring mean to you?
So mentoring used to, I have the benefit of being 30 years older than you, but mentoring used to be this thing where you just sort of helped somebody with their career, and you didn't really think of them as a whole or look at them as a whole. But there's so many, every aspect of you personally impacts you professionally. And the way I look at holistic mentoring is it's about supporting the whole individual beyond just school, beyond just work. It's looking at their goals, their personal goals, health, family situations, relationships, kind of like the relationship that you talked about with your mentee, how she got to know you as a person as well as this professional.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what holistic mentoring is all about, just realizing that that this person is multi-layered, and really getting to know and understand every one of those layers. And one of the things that I think I've learned about myself through mentoring is that I can still learn, that there's a lot to learn. And it's what you just said. I learn from my mentees. I learn so much from my mentees. And I'm not afraid to let them know that they've taught me a few things. So
Yeah, I really love what you're saying, how people are multi-layered, and all of those layers play a role in the decision-making process.
right.
So when someone, comes to me and they say, hey, I want to practice interviewing. I want to do a mock interview for you, with you, because I'm getting ready to go out and start interviewing for a new job. We inevitably will have a conversation about their passions. What is their personal mission? What drives them and what motivates them? And then when we're thinking long-term about those careers, how do those drives and passions and how does that personal mission fit into what their long-term hopes and dreams are? And how do you weave that in a concise way, in a pointed way into a job interview, for example?
Right.
I think that, but you learn so much about a person, about their hopes and dreams and what they want to do with their life during, at least in this moment. And I find it to just be so beautiful and so inspiring to learn so much about all these people. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's great. And I think it kind of segues into, both of our thoughts that you can't just have career mentoring. It has to be career mentoring and personal mentoring, that they're not separate. They're not separated. I think they're one.
So one thing you said a little bit earlier is that, a while ago, they were more separated.
They were, yeah, back in the day. And
yeah.
I think people were afraid to cross the boundary of, finding out about someone's personal circumstances. But I've really found over the years that that's how you develop closeness with someone is knowing those things about them. And knowing those things can also help you understand some of their circumstances a lot better. And so, yeah, no, it's truly transformed over the years. And yeah, it's a good thing.
That was going to be my next question. Do you think it's a good thing?
I think it's a good thing.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to ask you a question. Would you be willing to share some of your thoughts about being a woman of color in the mentee or mentor position, and how has that shaped your view and experiences with mentoring?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic for me, and thank you for asking. I think that there's still many barriers and challenges that continue to exist for diverse people in a non-diverse environment. Whether you're African American female, Latina, Latino, LGBTQ, doesn't matter what it is. Your personal identity can play a role in your career in many ways. And I think they play a role in mentor-menteeship as well. I wanted to share a little bit of a story because it was a time in my life where I was really fortunate. I had a lot of great things happening, but at the same time, I had a lot of challenges. So I was promoted to the first ever African American female general manager in the plastics division in GE ever. And because I didn't grow up in that division, I grew up in another business. They looked at me as an outsider and treated me as such. So I wasn't invited to meetings. I wasn't told about customer outings and events. They would all sneak away and go to lunch, and I would be there alone in the office. And it was just really terrible. And I decided that if I wanted to be successful, that I needed to make that not okay. And so I sought out mentors. And it just so happened that at the same time I was looking for a mentor, the company was incentivizing executives for having a mentee. And you got even more of an incentive if you had a mentee of color. And so I sought out the VP of Human Resources. Who better to help me with people situations than the VP of Human Resources. Now, there were pros and cons with him. I grew up pretty middle class, south side of Chicago. This guy grew up extremely wealthy, white male, and just didn't have much of a clue about my existence. However, I have to say that he ended up being one of the best mentors that I had. And primarily because of his position, he could make sure that the playing field was always leveled for me. I didn't want anything special. I didn't want anything more. I just wanted to be treated like everybody else and to have the same opportunity as everyone else. And in his role, he was able to ensure that those kinds of things happened. But at the same time, I needed the wisdom of someone who was African American or an African American female. And because there's no one size fits all in mentoring and mentorship, I had a white male VP of Human Resources. I had an African American male who was a senior executive and officer in GE. And then I had an African American female senior executive in GE. And that was my board of directors. And between the three of them, I was able to navigate through those difficult waters. And I think having the African American female mentor was really special for me because she was able to help me navigate through things like perception issues, things that the other people probably would not have been able to do. And so you'll never just have one mentor in your life that's kind of all things. You might, and if you do, you're very lucky. But most often you'll need one or two, or in my case, I had three that were able to kind of meet my needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you?
Well, I think that's a really powerful story, and it kind of links into what we were talking about, how people are layered.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it can be kind of a difficult topic for people that are looking for a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about the kind of mentor to look for.
Mm-hmm.
I have mentored people that are the same demographics than me, as me. I have mentored people who are very, very different than me, look different than me, have different life experiences, come from a different place. And one thing I try to do in those situations where I know that someone is very different to me, say it is a woman of color, for example, and their lived experience is going to be very different. I try to do as much listening as possible, knowing that my perspective, coming from privilege, as a white person, the advice I have and the perspective that I have might not be so helpful in certain contexts and certain things. And so trying to listen as much as possible, to ask as many questions as much as possible, and go back to what we talked about earlier about what also can I learn from this situation and from this person that might help to better inform how I choose to try to help them.
Yeah, no, you raised a good point. And I think also for me, I feel a certain responsibility to try to help young African American women because I feel like, there's a little bit more of a shortage, I think, for them in the world. And if I do have an opportunity to do that, I absolutely make sure that I do. I have a question for you. So give me an example of a success story that you've had as a mentor.
Oh, sure. I think a success story I really love to share is one actually that happened quite recently, happened this year. There's a young woman who kind of graduated from our programs at the Chicago Jazz Philharmonic and went through our education programs and graduated out, went to college at the Berklee School of Music, and then came back. And actually, one of our board members was like, hey, this person is coming back to Chicago and they need a job. And I told him that they would be an intern for you. And I said, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so, I didn't know this person because I'm quite new, right? So I didn't know all the back history and everything. And so he started off as an intern, and we're just doing some small tasks here and there and helping out all the different departments, marketing, development, education. And as a few weeks went by, and I was like, oh my goodness, this person's extremely smart and really capable. And so I decided to make that person my executive assistant intern. And so they worked directly under me and helped pretty much do everything that I do in all the departments. This person went to college to study performing arts and business management. And what they wanted to do, which they shared with me after I got to know them a little bit more and kind of poked and prodded at their life goals, is they wanted to be an executive director of an arts organization. And I was like, great, we can make that happen for you. And so, time went on, and they were like, well, this is really, I want something a little bit more permanent. And unfortunately, we just weren't able to offer, kind of full-time employment. And so I decided to try to help out. And so started connecting with all of my networks and putting out some feelers and passed along her resume everywhere that I could. And actually met someone at a party who was looking for a really great role. And I said, please turn off your notifications. I have found the person for you. And kind of arranged that first meeting and first interview. And I coached her all through the mock interviews. We did resume work. We did cover letter work. Really got her ready for that position and for that experience of really interviewing, which she hadn't done because she just kind of fell into this role here with me. And, got the job, went off, and is doing fabulously. And I saw her a few weeks ago, and we can't just stop ourselves from, how's it going? What's new? Tell me everything. What are you working on? And so it was just a really, really wonderful process to see someone do that, because I remember me going through those processes, and it's very scary. And when you have to do it alone, you are just trial and error, right? Mm-hmm. How many interviews do you have to just completely bomb before you're like, I got to stop saying that? And so it was lovely. It was a wonderful experience, and for both of us, and she'll always be very close to my heart.
So you went through every type of mentoring experience. It was informal, then it became formal, then it was initially transactional, then the coaching, and then you ultimately sponsored her to get to a new role. Look at you.
Well, I also love arts administration so much, and I'm so excited to see when people are excited about it. That I couldn't let someone go. Like, we need you in our ranks. We need you in this community because you're talented, and brilliant, and so what about yourself? I'd love to hear an example of a success story that you've experienced.
Well, I've had a million mentoring experiences and a few success stories, but there's one that I think is really close to my heart for a lot of reasons. And I think about them all the time, even though we've lost touch over the years. But it was years and years ago. My son was in high school, and he played on a basketball team. And there was a group of older boys that played in the same league. And the coach one day asked me if I would do him a favor. And he said, there's a young man on the team who's going off to college. And he comes from a very difficult home life. His mother is drug addicted, and he lives in an extremely rough community in Detroit. And he's a wonderful kid. And all we need you to do, so this was supposed to be transactional, all we need you to do is bring him to your house for 1 or 2 days, make him some home-cooked meals, and then drive him to college. I said, okay, I got this. My son was all excited because he had this big, basketball player staying with us a couple days. Now it's time to take him to college, which I had never taken anyone to college before. So I had no idea of the magnitude of stuff that you need to move into a dorm. And so we're getting his key, and I'm looking around at everybody, and they have, crates of stuff, and he just has a bag. And I said, "Hey, where's your stuff?" And I knew he was going to be going to school on a scholarship and that they would provide some things for him, but he didn't have anything to move into the dorm with. And so I said, "Get your key. We're going to Target." So I loaded him up with stuff. We dropped him off, but then he started to need help with writing papers, typing papers. In fact, I remember typing one of his papers where he talked about an experience that molded and shaped him, where he had seen someone get shot, and they were shot in the head, and he watched the person's head go through a plate glass window. And I said, "Oh my God," I was blown away by that experience. And I said, "This is somebody that really needs somebody in his life." And so I stayed with him as many things, as a coach, as a mentor, as a pseudo parent in many ways. We would go and pick him up for the holidays when he didn't have any place to go, and bring him home. And eventually he went to play in Finland, and then came back. He had gotten hurt, came back, got his degree, started a family, and is doing very well in his life. And I think about him all the time because I think about where he was and the impact that I was able to make in his life. Yeah, it was kind of a big one.
That's a really, really impactful story. And it's a testament to not only you, but also the rest of your family, right? Exercising that compassion for another person and being there for him.
Exactly. And it goes back to everything we were talking about, the being a holistic relationship. And so it was starting as transactional. I'm taking him to college, but I couldn't just do that. It's way bigger than that.
Yeah.
So,
wow. And it kind of touches on another question that I had for you as well, which is, some people might wonder, how do you get a mentor?
There's so many different ways to get a mentor. We probably touched on a few, but I think thinking about your circle, kind of starting with, your parents, who do they know? Your friends, maybe their parents and who they know, other family members, maybe community service organizations that you're a part of. Roosevelt University, talking to your guidance counselor, your human resources department at work. But I think before you even get to that point of a mentor, I think you have to think about your career and think about what it is that you want from your career, and kind of assess that first. And then think about your dream job. What does that look like? And then who actually has your dream job today? And maybe even think about reaching out to that person. But yeah, I think just looking in your inner circle may yield a mentor.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the only thing I would add to that is that I remember as a younger person in the early part of my career, I might have thought that I did not deserve, or I wasn't in a position to have a mentor. And I just wanted to vocalize and say out loud that everyone does, and that should you want one, you can find one, and that you do deserve that. I just wanted to empower everyone here to know that. I think I spent way too long not seeking one out when I could have. Yeah.
And to that person who doesn't feel deserving, I think as a mentor, it's important to affirm that person and let them know that they are indeed worthy, and to help them develop confidence in order to see that, that they are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have a question for you. So how do you celebrate successes with mentees? Now, you've had your
Oh,
mentee a while, and they're meeting their goals and milestones. How do you celebrate success, and is that even important?
I think it's hugely important, and I try to do it as often as possible to try to reframe things and to zoom out, first of all, and put in context what everyone has done so far. Um, Sometimes when we're in it, right, all you see is what's happening next and what you have to do next. Um, and so I really just tried to vocalize, look what you've done.
Right.
This is amazing. Or look at the skills that you've acquired to be able to handle the situation you just went through so gracefully.
Right.
And so I try to do a lot of verbalization. How about yourself? What is some way you celebrate successes?
Well, first of all, when my mentee is successful, I feel just as successful as they do. I feel so good to be a part of their success. And so I try to find ways to celebrate their success. I talk about them a lot. I let people know about them. I also, maybe I'll send them a nice handwritten note or a card, or even a little lunch, or take them to coffee, or something like that, just to let them know that I think that what they've done is amazing, and to celebrate it. But yeah.
That's lovely. I love that. I love the lunch idea too. Plus, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I think that we would like to have Jared return back into the session, and maybe he can open up some questions that people might have for us.
Thank you, Rhapsody. First of all, while I have worked with you both over the past couple of years, I must say that this was very enlightening. And every single time I am with you, I myself learn something. So thank you very, very much for being here. We do have two questions that have come in so far. The first is actually along the lines of social responsibility. So I think it's important maybe to consider Roosevelt's social justice mission with this question. It also goes back to the fact that we say our ultimate goal as an institution is to prepare students to go on and be civically engaged. So do today's leaders have a social responsibility to embrace a mentoring mindset? And do you think that mentorship can be used to encourage not only personal and professional growth, but perhaps a greater level of civic engagement amongst our younger generations?
I'll go. Was it to anyone specifically?
Anyone, yeah.
I'll go first. I think that if we could encourage more people to mentor African American, Latino, LGBTQ people outside of who they are, I think it could be very powerful. I think I know in the African American community, there aren't a tremendous amount of role models, especially for me in corporate America. We were like 5% African American in our company. And so I feel that there's almost a responsibility to kind of reach back and help someone of color, or a diverse population. But the other thing, though, is I think there's a little bit of intimidation because people don't understand, who someone is. They may not understand their background or how they were brought up. But I think you just have to have a certain amount of patience and listen and empathy, and soon you'll be able to understand. But I think there needs to be more programs focused specifically on mentoring people of color. I would love to see that, or all diverse populations.
Thank you. Rhapsody?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would love to see programs like that. I would 100% support programs like that any way that I could. To answer your question, Jared, I think that leaders, a good leader is kind of always mentoring, even just the people within their own staff. You're building the people that you work with, building their self-confidence, building their ability, building their desire or drive to be stretched or to grow, to evolve, all of those things, right? You're not only will your company or your organization benefit from that type of mindset, but so will, the people personally, individually, right, on your team. And I think that if, a good leader has that sort of mentality, then yes, it will apply to the general population at large, touching on that civic responsibility of social justice. So yeah, I think that if leaders being a good leader, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to start maybe within their company or within their organization, and it's going to spread, because that sort of mindset of compassion and encouraging others and uplifting and promoting others rather than yourself is going to trickle down into the programs that you're implementing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. So Heidi, you actually pointed out through Rhapsody's example of her mentoring success that she, in a relatively short period of time, went through really all of the stages of mentorship. And the next question is actually somewhat on that topic and its relevance. So can you elaborate a bit more on the life cycle of mentorship and how these relationships may change over time? And understanding that they may be more prevalent at certain times and not as much, but perhaps they even end up shifting from mentorship to more of a lifelong friendship. So can you elaborate on the life cycle of mentorship itself?
Yeah, and I'll do that through an example. So there was a lady who was promoted to a key role that came with a lot of benefits. And because it was a promotion, it was stuff she had never had before, like stock warrants, which are better than stock options. And so a friend asked me if I would speak with this person. I had never met her before, didn't know much about her, but just explained to her all about her benefits package, stock options, stock warrants, et cetera. And I started talking to her about it, and I realized that she didn't have a lot of insight into basic finances. And I asked her if I could be open with her and ask her a few personal questions, and because me putting my mentoring hat on, and she said, "Yeah, no, I don't understand much about money and investing." And so I asked her if I could teach her, if I could spend some time teaching her. And so that took the relationship from transactional to a more formal mentoring relationship. And then we spent a lot of time talking back and forth. We talked every other week about financial goals that she should have. For example, she had an 8-year-old son. She was a widow, but she didn't have a college fund set up for him, or basic life insurance, or very basic things that you should have. So I talked her through and worked with her on all those things. And then it ended up becoming that she was fine. She was great. She understood everything. She changed her life, her financial picture, based on goals that we had set. But then we just became great friends after that. And she still tugs on me when she needs me, but it's not every 2 weeks like it used to be. It may be once every year, once every couple years. And we check in with each other all the time just because we like each other and we're good friends. So I won't say that relationship had a formal end, Like there's no formal end necessarily to that relationship where someone says, okay, you good, I'm good. It can go on, or it can morph into something else that's even more special, like, like a lifelong friend.
Rhapsody, the final question for you is, can you talk a little bit about the importance of vulnerability and trust within mentorship? Because I think that one of the things that you both have referenced is life experiences and really bring so much to the table with mentees and mentors. And if you aren't able to build this level of trust and vulnerability with one another, you might very quickly hit roadblocks. So, how can we build relationships centered on trust and vulnerability to really allow mentorship to blossom into its fullest potential?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's a hard one, can be a hard one, or hard concept for people that spend a lot of time in leadership. We're used to kind of barking orders, right? We're in charge. But in order to be vulnerable, you have to remove your pride, and you have to remove any sort of I know better sort of mentality. That has to go, in order to actually be vulnerable and to really engage in your listening with someone who is opening up and sharing with you. Oftentimes it takes you being the first one to have to open up, share a personal story, or share the story about failure, multiple failures. Sometimes I've had to share all the different times that I have completely fallen flat on my face to get someone to be like, oh, okay, it wasn't just kind of a one-off. It's like, no, I had a pattern, and it took me a long time to break that pattern. So yeah, in general, I think what the mentor has to really understand that this is a partnership, right? It's not hierarchical.
Yeah. Heidi, is there anything you would like to add to that before we wrap up?
No, I agree. And I think, I think as mentor, I think sometimes you feel like your responsibility is to be the strong one and to coach, and it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about your own personal failures and your own personal experiences and the things that brought you to where you are today. I think those are the things that make you most human to your mentee and can foster that openness and that trust in the relationship.
Yeah. Well, thank you both very, very much. Thank you, Heidi and Rhapsody, for your time and for sharing your expertise with today's guests. You are always welcome back, and I look forward to working with you again. Thank you.
Too. Thank you. Thanks, Rhapsody. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks. Lovely as always. And thank you, Jared, for having us. Thank you to Roosevelt University and CCPA. And it's always a joy.
Absolutely. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, to our guests, thank you very much for your participation today. I hope you will join us for a future event. And please consider, as we mentioned, paying it forward, perhaps volunteering for Roosevelt's professional mentoring program, which pairs alumni and friends of the institution with current students. And finally, I hope that you will perhaps consider contributing to Roosevelt's second annual Day of Giving. It's our Lakers Day, and it is next Thursday on April 20th. And 100% of the contributions will go to support student scholarships. You may learn more about Lakers Day by visiting lakersday.roosevelt.edu. And thank you very much, and have a great day.
Bye.